My daughter-in-law Kayla shoved the mop at me and said, "You missed under the fridge again." My back was already aching, and my knees felt so swollen, it hurt just to stand. But I bent down anyway because she told me if I didn't pull my weight, she'd throw me out of the house. I helped her by right after I buried my only son. I wasn't her mother-in-law anymore. I was just her maid. That's how it stayed, until I finally stopped pretending everything was okay and got a lawyer. I made sure I took back every single thing she had taken from me. I remember the day it all really started. My son was standing right there in front of me, holding that silly cardboard box I'd told him not to lift. He was grinning like always, cracking some joke about me keeping too many Christmas decorations. I rolled my eyes and turned around to grab the tape gun. That's when I heard this strange sound, not a thud or a yell, just a quick, sharp breath and then nothing. When I looked back, Brian was already lying on the floor. The box had tipped over beside him, and his hands were curled up like he was trying to grab the air. I froze. I didn't scream. I didn't even move at first. My mind just went blank. Then something inside me finally woke up, and I dropped to my knees, shaking him, calling his name, slapping his cheek to try to wake him up. He didn't answer. His eyes were open, but they looked empty, like all the light had been turned off inside him. My hands were shaking so badly I could hardly press the numbers. When I called 911, I started doing chest compressions, counting out loud through my tears, begging him to stay with me. Kayla came running down the stairs, screaming and dropping her phone. She slipped on the carpet, crying so loud it felt like the whole house was shaking. I can't even remember what she said. It was all just noise, a blur of chaos. The paramedics took 7 minutes to get there. I counted every second. When they lifted Brian onto the stretcher, I kept waiting for them to say something, anything, but they didn't. At the hospital, they let me stay in the room while they tried to save him, but in my heart, I already knew he was gone. Kayla was pacing the hallway like she was on fire, wailing and throwing herself against the wall like she was the one who'd lost her child. I still didn't cry. I just stood there. I don't even know why. I felt like if I let myself fall apart, I'd never be able to stand up again. When the doctor finally came out and said the words, "Cardiac arrest, time of death," we did everything we could. Kayla collapsed to the floor like it was a scene from a movie. But I stayed standing. The ride home was silent. I sat in the back seat like a ghost while she was already texting people from the front, asking for donations for flowers, planning the funeral. I didn't care about any of it. I was still wearing the same clothes I'd had on when it happened, still had dust on my hands. The next morning, she brought me a cup of tea and said, "We'll get through this together, I promise." And I believed her. That was my first mistake. 2 days after the funeral, I came back to the house carrying grocery bags I'd paid for. Myself, I was still wearing the black blouse I'd worn to bury my son. When I put my key in the door, it wouldn't turn. I tried again, harder, nothing. I went around to the back door, same thing. I thought maybe the locks were broken. I rang the doorbell, and Kayla answered with a towel on her head and a glass of wine in her hand. She looked at me like nothing was wrong and said, "Oh, sorry, I changed the locks. Forgot to tell you." Just like that. No, sorry, no reason. I stood there on the porch holding my bags of eggs, bread, and toilet paper, while she smiled like she was doing me a favor. I asked her why. She said, "Security reasons. I've been alone, and you're not always around." I didn't understand. I hadn't left her side since Brian died. I slept in the guest room. I made her tea every night. I picked up her dry cleaning. But suddenly, I was a stranger in the house I'd helped pay for. That's when it hit me. My name wasn't on the deed. Years ago, when they were buying the place, Brian had called me crying because the bank wouldn't approve their mortgage because of Kayla's student loans. I gave them $80,000 from my retirement money to help with the down payment. I didn't ask for any papers. I trusted them when they said they'd add my name later. They never did. When I finally got inside, everything felt different. There were labels on the fridge, her name on one shelf, a sticky note with my name by the crisper drawer. My coat was gone from the hall closet. In the guest bathroom, there was only one towel. When I asked if I could have another, she said, "Oh, sorry, I'm doing laundry tomorrow." She started locking her bedroom door. She made rules about no noise after 10 p.m. because she needed space to grieve. So I stayed quiet. I sat in that little guest room with no TV, no closet, no drawers. I folded my clothes on the floor. I didn't even hang up Brian's photo because I didn't want to upset her. I told myself she was just in shock, that it would pass. But it didn't. And one night, I finally realized just how alone I was. I even tried to act calm about that part. I told her it must be some kind of mix-up. But she pulled out a copy of the check, waving it in my face. It had my name and my old signature, but the handwriting was messy, and the check number didn't match the ones I'd brought over that night. My heart started racing. I went to the desk drawer in the hallway and opened it. Inside, my old checkbook was sitting there with a bunch of pages ripped out. Then I heard her voice. She was on the phone with someone, and she was actually laughing. She said, "It's not that bad. She's like a built-in housekeeper. No rent, no paycheck, just guilt." She let out a little chuckle and added, "I'm telling you, Brian dying was awful. But at least now I get the whole house." I stood behind the laundry room door, holding my breath so she wouldn't hear me crying. I could have walked out right then. I could have called her out and packed my things, but something in my gut told me that was just the beginning, that it was only going to get worse. It started with small things. She'd asked me to set the table, wipe the counters, wash the dishes, after she cooked. At first, I thought I was just trying to stay busy so my sadness wouldn't swallow me up, but by the end of that first week, she left a note on the kitchen counter. It was just a list: groceries, eggs, oat milk, detergent. Also mop the floors, clean the bathroom, wipe the baseboards. Thanks. No smiley face, no please. Just instructions, like I was her cleaning lady. I actually laughed when I read it, thinking maybe she was just trying to keep the house going the way Brian used to. But the next day, there was another list, then another. Every morning, no good morning, no how are you, just orders. One day, I finally asked if we could sit down and talk about it. She rolled her eyes and said, "Lena, I know you're grieving, but so am I. I can't carry this place by myself." I told her I was glad to help, but maybe we could split things up more fairly. She cut me off and said, "You live here for free. You don't pay rent. You don't contribute. At least let me focus on my career while you take care of the house." That word contribute made my stomach twist. I wanted to remind her whose money built this house in the first place, but I swallowed it. I told myself it wasn't worth fighting over. Then she started telling me what I could and couldn't eat. She wrote her name on leftovers with a marker. She put sticky notes on containers that said, "Not yours." She even locked her snacks in a separate cabinet with a little padlock. One night, I made myself a grilled cheese sandwich, and she snapped, "Did you use my butter? That was imported." I said I was sorry. She just shook her head and walked away, muttering that I was costing her more than I was worth. That same night, I heard her on speakerphone again. She probably didn't realize I was in the hallway. She was telling a friend, "It's like living with a maid. She folds my towels, vacuums, scrubs my toilets. It's kind of amazing. I mean, I wouldn't call it elder abuse, but if the shoe fits, right?" Then she laughed. A real loud laugh, like it was funny, like I was a joke. I stood there in my socks, holding a basket of clean laundry, listening to this woman who used to hug me at my son's wedding, the woman who cried on my shoulder when he died, the woman who promised she'd treat me like family. Now she was laughing about me like I was just some burden she couldn't wait to get rid of. That night, I went to bed without folding the rest of the towels. It was the first time I let something go. The next morning, she banged on my door and said, "When the towels don't get folded, I don't have clean ones for my workout. If you can't keep up, I'll have to think about other options for your living situation." That's when I knew this wasn't about grief. This was about power. She wanted to wear me down, to push me out or keep me quiet. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her I wasn't some weak old woman she could bully. But I didn't. I just nodded and said, "Sorry, I'll be better today." And I even managed a smile. Because while I was wiping her countertops and scrubbing her bathroom, I started paying attention. I noticed little things, receipts that didn't match up, bills I'd never seen before, jewelry that went missing. That was the moment I stopped thinking like a victim and started thinking like a witness. The first thing I noticed was my mother's wedding ring, the only thing I had left from her. I wore it to every special occasion and took it off only when I did the dishes. One day, it was gone. I checked the little ceramic dish where I always put it, then the bathroom shelf, then the nightstand. Nothing. I thought maybe I'd misplaced it, but deep down, I knew. I thought maybe I'd just put the ring somewhere weird because I was so tired. So I tore that little guest room apart from top to bottom, checked every drawer, every pocket, even under the bed, but it wasn't there. Later, I asked Kayla, in the most casual voice I could manage, hoping she might have seen it while cleaning. She didn't even look up from her laptop. She just said, "No, haven't seen it," like it was nothing. That night, I heard a clinking sound when she tossed a receipt into the kitchen trash. After she went upstairs, I dug it out. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost ripped it. It was from a pawn shop 2 towns over. One item, vintage gold ring with floral etching, $250. My throat closed up. I felt like I couldn't breathe. That ring was worth at least 10 times that, and she knew it. I wanted to march upstairs, shove the paper in her face, and scream, but I didn't. I just stood there in the dark kitchen, reading that slip over and over, until I thought my heart might stop. A few days later, I heard her on FaceTime with a friend, bragging about liquidating assets. She said, "Lena's got all this old lady jewelry collecting dust. Honestly, it's just sitting there. I'm putting it to good use." Then she laughed and added, "Plus, she doesn't even notice. Her memory's not great these days," like it was a joke. I walked back to my room and pulled open the bottom drawer of my suitcase where I'd hidden some cash I brought from my apartment. Half of it was gone. My chest got tight. I checked my bank account on my phone, and there were 2 ATM withdrawals I never made. The dates were the same days I'd gone out grocery shopping for her. But the worst part was when I went to the church office to ask about the thank you cards for Brian's memorial. The secretary pulled me aside and whispered, "Hey, just so you know, the check you wrote for the flower donation bounced." I froze. I hadn't written any check. My hands started to sweat. The carbon slips were missing from my checkbook. Right then, it all clicked into place. She was stealing from me, piece by piece, while pretending we were both just grieving. I went home and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. My whole body was shaking. I kept hearing Brian's voice in my head, the way he used to say, "She's smart, Mom, but she's not mean. You'll love her." And I had loved her. I gave her everything, my money, my help, my son. And now, to her, I was nothing but a walking ATM she didn't even have to thank. That night, I turned off the light early and lay there staring at the ceiling until the sun came up. When morning finally came, I got dressed, walked 3 blocks to the bus stop, and took the first bus into town. I didn't leave a note. I didn't tell her where I was going. I walked into a legal aid office and asked if anyone there handled elder abuse cases. The receptionist looked surprised but didn't ask questions. She led me to a lawyer named Trish. The first thing Trish asked was, "Is anyone else in your house aware this meeting is happening?" I shook my head. She gave me a small, kind smile and said, "Good, let's keep it that way." Trish didn't look shocked when I told her everything: the chores, the lists, the missing ring, the bounced check. She just nodded, like she'd heard this story 100 times. It made my heart ache to think I wasn't the only person going through something like this. She explained what elder abuse really meant. It wasn't just bruises or mean words. It could be financial control, manipulation, forcing someone to work for shelter, isolating them from friends. She said, "If she's using your money without permission and making you do everything just to have a roof over your head, that's a case." I asked her what proof I needed. She slid a notepad across the desk and said, "Start here. Write down dates, details, receipts, names, everything, even the small stuff." She told me not to confront Kayla, not to change how I acted, not to let her suspect I was preparing anything. "She needs to feel comfortable so she keeps making mistakes," Trish said. I nodded. I wrote down everything I could remember from the last 2 weeks and promised to come back with more. That afternoon, I stopped by the church. Mr. Jensen, who sometimes fixed things around the building, was there. I asked him if he knew where I could buy a cheap little camera. He didn't ask why. He just said, "I've got an old one I used when my garage kept getting broken into." He handed it to me in a sandwich bag with a USB cord. "Just delete the old footage. It loops every 48 hours, he said. I thanked him and went home, my palms sweating the whole way. That night, when Kayla left for her wine and charcuterie book club, I set up the camera inside a candle holder in the kitchen, right where I always mopped and did the dishes. I tested the angle with a bowl, just to be sure it could see everything. It worked perfectly. The next morning, she left another note on the counter. "Pantry smells. Clean it top to bottom. Use gloves this time, not your hands." She even added a smiley face, like that made it cute. I did the work, and I made sure to do it right in front of that little camera. That week, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt ready. I started writing everything down. I filmed her voice on video, telling me I was lucky she even let me stay. I caught her face twisted up in anger when I forgot to vacuum under the couch. I recorded her storming into the kitchen after a work call, yelling, "Why are there streaks on the microwave? Are you blind or just lazy?" I didn't react. I just nodded and kept scrubbing. At night, I transferred the videos onto my old laptop. I backed everything up on a little flash drive I hid inside a vitamin bottle in my purse. I kept track of every dollar she took. I saw her use Brian's old debit card to buy herself a fancy purse, a hair appointment, and a $380 spa visit she claimed was therapy. I even recorded her on a speakerphone call, laughing with her friend. "She's like a golden goose," she joked. "Except instead of eggs, I get free labor and stolen heirlooms." Her friend laughed and said, "God, you're evil." Kayla just grinned and said, "Only if she ever finds out." That's when I knew she didn't think I was capable of fighting back. She thought I was weak. She thought my silence meant I was too slow to understand what she was doing. That was her biggest mistake. Every time she barked orders, every time she made a snide remark, every time she acted sweet in public and cruel in private. I added another note to the folder Trish had helped me set up on a cloud drive. I even saved a copy on a flash drive I tucked into the back of my Bible. I took screenshots of text messages, receipts, even her little chore lists. I printed them out at the library. I told Trish everything. She said, "We'll file when the pattern is clear. We want this to look airtight. We want to bury her in so much evidence she can't wriggle free." Something changed in me after that. I stopped hoping Kayla would turn into a better person. I stopped wondering if maybe she was just sad and didn't know how to show it. No, she knew exactly what she was doing. And now, finally, I did too. It was a Tuesday morning when she finally slipped up and gave me exactly what I needed. The day started the way they all did. A note on the counter. "Wash curtains, vacuum the ceiling, corners, and don't half-ace it this time." She was already in a bad mood because a client canceled a meeting and her car wouldn't start. I could tell by how she slammed the cabinet doors that she was itching to take it out on me. I kept my head down and scrubbed the sink harder than usual because I knew the camera hidden inside the fruit bowl had a clear view. She walked in and stood behind me, arms crossed. "You missed a spot behind the faucet," she said. I nodded. "I'll get it," she scoffed. "You always say that. Then I have to do it myself. You act like you're doing me a favor by living here. You'd be on the street if it weren't for me." I didn't answer. I just kept scrubbing. That's when she yanked the sponge out of my hand and slammed it into the sink. "Do you want me to call a care facility? Is that what you want? Because I can't do this every day with you moping around like a ghost." "Brian's dead." "Okay, it's been long enough." That word enough made my whole spine go stiff. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just looked at her, quiet. That seemed to bother her more than anything else. She kicked the chair next to her out of the way and hissed, "Fine. Just stand there then." Useless as ever. Then she turned and stomped out of the room. That alone would have been enough proof, but that afternoon, she had a friend over, Sasha, who I'd only seen once at the funeral. They sat in the kitchen drinking white wine, laughing too loud. I was folding laundry in the dining room when I heard Kayla say, "It's amazing, honestly. It's like having a senile cleaning lady for free. She barely talks, just does whatever I say. I'm starting to wonder if I should take out a life insurance policy on her." Sasha gasped and said, "Kayla, that's awful." But Kayla just laughed. "I'm kidding, kind of." Then she added, "It's not my fault she's too passive to stand up for herself." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just made sure the mic on the camera was still recording. That night, I uploaded the files, labeled and dated every clip, and sent them all to Trish with the subject line, "Verbal, psychological, and financial abuse confirmed." Trish called me the next morning. "This is gold," she said. "We're moving forward." I asked if I needed to tell Kayla. "Absolutely not," she said. "The power of this case is in the surprise." After I hung up, I sat on the porch, with a cup of tea, the first cup I'd made just for myself in months. I watched the sky change colors and started thinking about all the little things Kayla had taken from me. My routines, my peace, my sleep, but not my voice. Not anymore. I thought about Brian and how he used to kiss me on the cheek and say, "You're too soft for this world, Ma, but that's what makes you good." I used to believe that too. But standing in that house, I knew I wasn't trying to be good anymore. I was just trying to survive. And finally, for the first time since he died, I wasn't only surviving, I was planning. Because the moment Kayla raised her voice in front of that hidden camera, she stopped being the one in control and she didn't even know it yet. The envelope showed up on a Thursday. A deputy came to the door, knocked twice, and didn't wait long. He just handed it over and said, "For Kayla Anderson." I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters, when she opened the door. She was still in her robe. The second she saw the paperwork, her face went stiff. "What the hell is this?" she muttered, flipping through the pages. Then her eyes snapped up and locked on me, like she finally understood. "You sued me." I didn't say a word. I just stood there with my hands still wet from the sponge. She stormed across the room, slammed the envelope on the counter, and hissed, "You ungrateful, backstabbing hag." Her voice was shaken, because she was scared, but because she was furious. She hadn't seen it coming. She spent the next 10 minutes yelling at me. She called me crazy, said I'd regret this, said no judge would ever believe a forgetful old woman over a grieving widow. I didn't respond. That seemed to make her even angrier. All weekend, she paced around the house on her phone, talking in a low, tense voice. She was probably trying to find a lawyer, or figure out how to make everything disappear. On Monday morning, she handed me a letter. "This is from your doctor," she said. I opened it. It was a typed note saying I had early onset dementia. I was confused, prone to hallucinations and paranoia. It was dated last month and signed by Dr. Helen Sumner. I recognized the name, but I hadn't seen her in 6 years. I looked at the signature. It didn't match the ones on the old prescriptions I still kept in my bag. My hands didn't even shake. I folded the paper neatly and set it on the kitchen counter. Then I went to my room, grabbed my flash drive, and sent everything to Trish: video, receipts, and a scanned copy of the forged letter. When I called Trish, she picked up on the first ring and said she just walked into the trap. The next day in court, Kayla came in looking like she was auditioning for some sad movie. She was dressed in black, holding a packet of tissues, tears already shining in her eyes. Her lawyer stood beside her, a young man with slicked back hair, and a face that looked like he practiced looking concerned in a mirror. I sat across the room, calm and quiet, watching it all play out. Kayla spoke first. She told the judge how she'd taken me in out of kindness, how I'd been emotionally unstable after Brian died, how I'd started forgetting things and accusing her of stealing. She passed the judge the doctor's letter. Then Trish stood up. She didn't say anything at first. She just walked up to the bench and laid down a thick folder. Inside were the camera recordings, the chore lists, the pawnshop receipts, the bank statements, and last, the forged letter right next to a real signature from Dr. Sumner, who had already sent in a statement saying she hadn't seen me in over 5 years and never diagnosed me with anything. The judge looked at Kayla's lawyer and asked if he'd like to respond. He glanced down at the folder, then over at Kayla, and said nothing. Kayla's face turned pale. Her mouth opened like she was going to come up with another lie, but nothing came out. The judge leaned forward and said, "Miss Anderson, you're being accused of financial exploitation, psychological abuse, and forgery. This is no longer just a civil matter." The air in the room changed. Even the bailiff stood up straighter. Kayla didn't say a word. She just sank into her chair like her legs wouldn't hold her up anymore. But I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat there with Brian's funeral program in my lap, quietly tracing his name with my thumb. I thought about what he'd say if he were here. I already knew. He wouldn't have said much. He would have just pulled me close and whispered, "It's over, Ma. You did it." Except it wasn't over, not yet. Not until the judge finished reading every page. The ruling came faster than I expected, but not before I watched Kayla squirm, in a way I had never seen before. All her smugness crumbled under the weight of her own lies. The judge didn't even need to raise his voice. He read through every line, paused on the forged doctor's note, and said, "This is criminal." Kayla's lawyer tried to spin it, saying maybe there had been confusion about our financial arrangements, that grief had blurred the details. But then Trish handed over a spreadsheet with dates, amounts, receipts, and video clips to match. The judge interrupted him and said firmly, "You're not going to talk your way through this. I'm ruling in favor of Ms. Harris on all counts." Then the judge started listing what was going to happen, one thing at a time, like he was peeling away the layers of a rotten onion. First, he said the house was mine again. He called it a corrective transfer because of the verbal agreement and the down payment I'd given them all those years ago. Next, he ordered Kayla to pay me back for everything she'd stolen: my jewelry, the money she'd taken out of my account, the checks she'd used without asking. Altogether, it was more than $18,000 in damages. On top of that, she had to cover my legal fees, and he put a 5-year restraining order in place right then and there. Kayla's mouth fell open. She started to argue, saying she had nowhere else to go, but the judge didn't care. He looked her right in the eye and said, "You had no problem evicting your mother-in-law when she had no one. You'll survive." She tried to yell something at me about how Brian would be ashamed and how I was taking everything from her, but the bailiff stepped in. He walked her out as she kept ranting. I didn't flinch. I didn't even look at her. I just stood up, gathered my folder, and walked past her like she was nothing but a stranger on the sidewalk. When I stepped outside the courtroom, I finally let out a long breath. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. Trish hugged me tight. She told me I was stronger than most people she'd ever worked with, and for the first time, I believed it. When I got home, I unlocked the door with the key that finally belonged to me alone. It was quiet inside. No sticky notes, no chore lists, no whispers behind my back. Just the hum of the fridge and the tick of the clock. I walked into Kayla's old room. She hadn't taken much. A half-finished glass of wine on the nightstand, one earring, a crumpled tissue on the floor. It didn't feel like a victory lap. It felt like finally coming up for air after being underwater too long. I stood there for a long time. Then went to the closet and pulled out a box I hadn't dared to touch in weeks. Brian's things. Inside were photo albums, his baseball glove, and a letter he wrote me in high school when he thought he was going to fail math. I held that letter in my hands, and everything crashed over me at once. I hadn't cried in court. I hadn't cried when I got the house back, but standing there, holding that silly letter where he'd signed it, "Love you forever, your favorite son, because I'm your only one," I finally broke down, not because of everything I'd lost, but because of everything I'd had and everything I'd finally taken back. But there was still one thing I hadn't done. One thing I couldn't skip, because no matter how much I'd won, I still hadn't told Brian what really happened, not out loud, not completely. And before I could let go of any of it, I needed to do that. I waited until the house felt clean, again, like it really belonged to me, and the air didn't feel heavy with her anymore. Then I pulled out the letter I'd been writing for days. I'd folded and unfolded it so many times that the paper was starting to tear. The next morning, just after sunrise, I walked to the cemetery. I brought nothing but that letter and a little folding chair. His grave was neat. The grass was freshly cut, the headstone polished, like someone had been there, even though I knew she hadn't visited in weeks. I sat down slowly, my knees aching from the cold, and stared at his name carved into the stone. Brian Thomas Harris, 1989 to 2024. I still hated how close the dates were. Too close, too short. I unfolded the letter and started reading out loud, my voice soft but steady. "Brian, I don't even know where to start. You were everything to me. You knew that. Losing you broke me in ways I don't even know how to explain. But what came after, what she did, it wasn't just grief. It was control. It was theft. It was cruelty pretending to be mourning. I know you loved her. I know you thought she'd take care of me. I wanted to believe that too. Maybe she changed. Or maybe she was always like this and just hid it better when you were here. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted peace. I wanted a place to cry without feeling like a prisoner. But when she started selling my things, using my money, and mocking me behind my back, I finally saw it. She didn't see me as family. She saw me as a burden, and then as an easy target. And the worst part is, I let her treat me like I was just furniture in this house I helped build, because I thought that's what you'd want. No drama, no division. But then I remembered something you said once, after you stuck up for me in the grocery store when that woman was rude. You said, "Nobody disrespects my mom, not even family." And that's when I knew I had to stand up for myself, even if it meant standing alone. My voice shook, and I had to stop and catch my breath. I stared at the ground, imagining he was there, listening. I sued her, Brian, quietly, carefully, and I won. She forged documents. She lied to the court. She embarrassed herself in front of everyone, and now she's gone. I live here again, just me. I thought it would feel empty, but it doesn't. It feels free. And I think that's the part you'd be proud of, not the money, not the legal win, but that I finally remembered who I was. I folded the letter back into a small square. Then I reached into my bag and slid it under the corner of Brian's headstone. I weighed it down with a smooth stone I'd picked up from the hiking trail he loved as a kid, the one where he used to fill his pockets with rocks just because he liked the way they felt. I stood up, wiped my eyes, and whispered, "I miss you every single day, but I'm okay now, I promise." And I meant it, because, for the first time since he died, I wasn't just getting by because I felt like I had to. I was living because I wanted to. The first thing I did when I got home, my home, was change the locks. Not because I was scared, but because I wanted the sound of a new key turning in the door to feel like the start of something that belonged to me alone. After that, I washed all the curtains and moved the furniture around, so the house wouldn't feel like hers anymore. I donated the robe she'd left hanging on the bathroom door. I threw away every sticky note I found hidden behind books and tucked under drawers, like she'd left little reminders of herself just to haunt me. Then I made a list, not like the lists she used to leave me, but my own list. Simple things I wanted to do, now that the house was truly mine. I started small. I joined a book club. I volunteered at the church pantry. I went for a walk every morning before breakfast. I got a part-time job at the flower shop down the street, just so I could keep my hands busy and my heart moving forward. I bought a new phone and only gave my number to people who made me feel seen and cared for. I planted marigolds out front, Brian's favorite, even though he always said they were the ugliest flowers in the prettiest color. And one quiet Thursday afternoon, I went to a little second-hand shop in town and bought myself a simple gold ring. It wasn't expensive or fancy, but it was mine. I wore it on my right hand not to replace the one she stole, but to remind myself that I still had more life to build. People sometimes ask if I ever heard from Kayla again. The answer is no. The restraining order kept her away legally, but I think her pride kept her from ever reaching out. She never apologized, never called, never wrote hand. I'm glad, because, in the end, closure didn't come from her. It came from me deciding I didn't need her to say she was sorry to heal. I still hear Brian's voice in my head sometimes, especially when I walk past his old room or see a young man his age at the grocery store. I'll never stop missing him. But now the grief doesn't choke me like it used to. It just sits beside me, quiet and familiar, like an old friend who knows better than to talk when I'm finally smiling. The best part isn't that I got the house back or that I recovered the money. It's that I found my voice again, the voice I'd hidden for so long out of fear and trying to be polite. I used to think staying quiet kept the peace, but all it ever did was make space for people like her to walk right over me. So now, I speak up, I laugh loud, I say no when I need to. And if anyone asks why I finally stood up for myself, I tell them the truth. Grief made me quiet, but injustice made me loud. And I'm never shutting up again.